we have voltage data available from ORT. I mean, I was conflicted whether to say what object we are observing, but I think at this point we have advertised it quite a few times, and it's better to know what object you're using, you're looking at, so that when you do see the signal, you can be sure you're on the right track. So we are looking at essentially a pulsar data. What we have here are, I mean, I've made uh, the Python notebook such that it essentially describes what are the steps you need to take to do the basic analysis. I've given the algorithms, and also in the case of Python, if Python is your preferred programming language, it will be great because I've also given what sort of commands you can use and given links to it. You are free to use whichever programming language you're comfortable with. But you will notice that Python is not very hard to use either. If you know a programming language, you just have to know the algorithms. You search for equivalent syntax online, how to do a particular thing in Python, and you can always do Python with relative ease. And here the algorithm is given, and in many cases, the links to the commands that would be useful in Python to get that done is also given. So you could either give it a try over here in a Colab notebook or use your preferred language. It's fine. Either way, it's fine with us. But of course, you'll have to access this file. You can open it in Colab or as a Jupyter notebook locally on your system, and you can at least go over the algorithm generally. Okay, so what we have is about 5 data files. I think all 5 of them. I haven't looked personally into all of them. I think 2 of them, 1 or 2 of them, I've looked into. It's essentially voltage data from ORT. Um, so just a brief description about the data file itself. It's a time series that is given in 2 columns, one for the OT radio telescope north and one for south. Um, and these are raw voltages. The units themselves are arbitrary, it's not calibrated. The frequency range of observation was 326 plus or minus 8.25. And if I'm not wrong, Desh, this has been down converted to 0 to 16 megahertz, right?
Yes,
Okay, yeah.
or effectively, even though it was at another frequency and it is
Right,
during the sampling, that conversion has automatically taken place. So we can assume
right.
for.
Okay, yeah. So eventually you can express it when you plot it, and you can show them between around 326.5 megahertz. But when you do find the frequency, uh, constituent frequencies while doing Fourier transform or something, it will be from 0 to 16.5. So the data is sampled at Nyquist rate. It has 2 real voltage measurements for the lowest period of interest, or maximum variability, between the maximum variability time scale. And that you can calculate by using this formula. The length of the data is about 1 second, may not be exactly equal in all the cases. That you can again just see the length of the data multiplied by the time resolution that you get over here and get it. So initially you can look at some of the statistical properties that you've been hearing about. The voltages themselves will be Gaussian distributed. You can visualize the time series. You can plot the voltage data. Next, what you can do is you can draw a histogram of these values and uh, check for yourself that it follows a Gaussian distribution. Or if it does deviate, you can still report that, and we can try to figure out what could be causing these deviations. And if you take the mod square, or just the square of it, you'll get the power values. You can see what distribution that follows as well. Um, so I have linked actually. Okay, if you're going to be using before going into the details of those, I'll just talk about some of the things you need to take care of while setting it up. If you're going to run it on Colab Notebook, which you can easily do, you don't really have to connect it to your local runtime. You can run it entirely on Google servers. It works just fine. I've tested it. And then you don't have to worry about plotting these on your system yourself, although these are fairly straightforward and simple libraries. What you can do is this data is all saved in Google Drive, and in principle, you can directly access these files from the Drive location and download it and analyze it. So that is what this piece of code does over here. You don't have to worry too much about each step here, but I have tried to comment it as much as possible. But if you follow these steps, choose a particular file ID, then um, at this point of the cell, the data will be all loaded. All you have to do is put it in a data frame and give the titles that you prefer, and the data is loaded at this point here. Now with the voltage time series, you can do plots of histograms, time series, the same thing you can do with power. I was thinking whether to show you sample plots or not, but I mean, there's pros and cons to both. The thing is, it's nice to work on some data, not knowing how it's going to look, and plot it by yourself, and be at least mildly excited when you see some signal or see something that you expect it to do, and so on. If I show a lot of plots, I feel one would be too focused on trying to match something that has been shown and worry too much about uh, whether they've got it wrong or right or wrong. What I could suggest is that you start playing out with the data. And if you want some confirmation, you can contact any of us and we'll be able to help you out to confirm, or if there is a problem, we can point it out, or we can confirm whether you're on the right track. Okay, you'll see that a lot of these are hyperlinked to resources that will be useful. For instance, when you convert the probability, the distribution of voltages to a distribution of power, what sort of form does it follow? It's close to exponential, but I mean, it's close to an exponential. So you can plot the power time series, power histogram, and then you finally would come to the a main way of looking at data, that is the dynamic spectrum. Now, even before that, I should tell you how to get the spectrum. Yeah, so, okay, no, that comes under dynamic spectrum. So what you can do is, so you have these voltage data that is varying in time, and you'll have to select appropriate number of these voltage samples and Fourier transform to get the spectrum in that particular time bin. So, so that's what this sort of thing describes, how to choose the right number of frequency bins, and decide, and then find out what is the time bin that you end up with, how many points you should take to do the FFT for a particular number of frequency bins that you want to have. And it also gives you which commands you can use to get all these, like essentially the FFT or getting the frequencies of the FFT. So essentially it uses a NumPy, if most of you who use Python will be familiar with it. The only things, so till this point, pretty much till this point, plotting the dynamic spectrum. So once you regroup the data, you have this voltage time series, you regroup it so that you have chunks of voltage samples that you're going to take Fourier transform and convert to spectrum in that bin. So now you'll have a series of spectra in time instead of just voltages. Of course, the time bin will be larger now, according to the number of points of you took for FFT. What you can do is you can plot this as something called a dynamic spectrum, which is how the spectrum varies with time. Now, this will be something that will immediately start showing you if there is something interesting in your data. I do explain here that if this is essentially high resolution data, so it might be useful at various points to appropriately bin them so that your signal to noise also improves, and your signal is more easily visible rather than you having this unwieldy large set of spectra that you're having a hard time even to plot and to see the signal in it. So till this point, it's mostly plotting to the point that you get the dynamic spectrum. And once you get the dynamic spectrum for pulsars, you'll see some clear signals, clear patterns. What will happen is probably, I don't know whether it has been covered yet, uh, about dispersion of the signal that is coming from source. I think Desh covered it, although I'm not sure. So what happens is the lower frequency signals, even if uh, emission happens at all frequencies at the same time at the source, because because of dispersion due to the interstellar medium electrons, the lower frequency signals will be delayed compared to the high frequency signals. And this follows a form of 1 over nu square, the delays. That is also sort of all explained here. So what that means is when you look at the dynamic spectrum, you'll see that if you see a signal, the signal will be delayed as you go to lower frequencies. And another thing about pulsars that you'll notice that the signal will have a periodicity. So we have chosen a source over here which has a few periods within the 1 second of data that we have. So you should be able to see these two patterns very clearly: the dispersion of the signal, and also the periodicity. Now the only thing, now you will go to the source characterization, where essentially you'll do two things: correct for this dispersion, uh, the dispersion delays, and then you'll fold it by the period of the pulsar and get integrated pulse profile. Now you can do the first step. Once you have the dynamic spectrum, you'll get an idea of what the maximum delay is for the frequency range you're observing, with which you can sort of get a rough estimate of the dispersion measure, and you can actually correct for it, assuming a rough value. Similarly, you can look at the plot and find a rough value of the period. You can use that value. You can get an integrated profile just to make sure you know the algorithm is working right. But then what we would like you to do is get a more accurate value, for which you would essentially uh, take a matrix of values, two-dimensional distribution of DM and dispersion measure and period. And what you'll do is uh, try to repeat this procedure of getting the integrated profile and try to see where the power distribution is the narrowest, so that the profile is the narrowest, and hence the intensity square and added will be maximum for that profile. So I should say that so far I've explained till only finding the approximate DM value and correcting for it. What I'll do is I'll add a little bit of section about how to improve on these values, and then it will be a lot more clearer. For now, you can still get started. I'll update you as soon as I add that little section about how to optimize and get the best fit values using essentially this method of looking in a matrix of values around the rough value of DM and period. Okay. So I think, yeah, this one, it's better to start getting your hands dirty, start working. You can do a little bit each day, and then what I'll do is I'll today set up a folder where you can put your updates as it comes along, so that I can also check if you have a question. I can refer to it and then help you out if you're getting stuck somewhere, or if you just want to make sure something is right.
So can I ask some questions?
Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, probably the answers are in these sheets. I have not gone through them. My first question is, what is the time delay between the northern and the southern array? Meaning, how is it compared to the time resolution of the data?
Is zero.
The delay is zero.
Yeah.
Or
Relative delay has been adjusted for the source direction, okay, to catch the same wavefront. So there is no further adjustment required between the north and south signal.
so we generally we do that adjustment, or meaning in this data that adjustment has already been done.
Well, in the telescope setup itself, the signals traveling from some direction which is at an angle with respect to the vertical, the instrument vertical, will be seen, the arrival times will be different. Correct?
Oh, yes, that.
For the two halves. And that has been already corrected for in preparation of, comparing these two outputs, okay, so that they are on the same footing, they correspond to the same wavefront.
Okay, so we need not worry about.
Yeah, you need not worry about the left uncompensated delay. Okay, normally in reality you need to compensate for it, but it's already compensated. And for convenience, we have recorded these two separately. We could have now more often than not, people actually combine this already and record only one output. But this also gives an advantage of you seeing how the interferometry would work, right?
Otherwise, the statistics will be different for the northern and southern. Meaning, if we do the determine the statistical parameters.
Statistical parameters will be same. Even with a small shift, the ensemble is not going to see much change.
Okay. So if I determine the variance or the mean of.
There could be some differences in the gains, okay, of the amplifiers in one chain and the other, which might show up in the magnitudes being a little different.
Little meaning what is the range of that difference? Meaning, is it considerable?
It should not be considerable. Okay. Ideally, they should be comparable if everything was adjusted correctly.
Okay.
But you can even comment on that.
So from this, my next question is, if I want to improve the signal to noise ratio of the signal.
Right.
So can I add the power from the two halves?
You might even add voltages from the two halves. Okay. Which might even give a better coherent picture. You might gain factor of 2 in sensitivity because you will be using twice the collecting area effectively. Instead of doing a power addition, which will gain you only √2.
So voltage will give me, okay.
Because the voltage is also coherent.
Because I was thinking that if I'm adding the power, it will give me an incoherent addition.
Correct.
As I saw in your previous talk.
Right.
So
here you can treat the bigger aperture as a whole, okay, by adding the voltage signal or the fields received by the two halves, as long as they are brought in phase, which they have been done already.
Okay.
By adding them, you would actually have an effect of increasing the collecting area by a factor of 2.
So that is
combination, and that gains you straight away that factor in sensitivity.
Okay. And another one is, can we determine the period derivative P dot from this much long data segment?
Yeah, this is only 11 pulses, okay, in 1 second. And typical derivatives, okay, period derivatives are of the order of part in a 10 to the 15.
14, 15 years.
Okay, so to see appreciable difference, even at the level of a sample, which is typically about fraction of a microsecond, right? Or few tenths of nanoseconds. So to see such a shift in the data, you can do the calculation. You will require at least 10 to the 6 seconds worth of data.
Okay, minimum this much long.
Before you can begin to notice the difference. Okay. That is even in the ideal case. Okay. There is in the absence of noise and so on.
Okay. And
so that's typically a day. Okay.
That's 10 to the power 6 is, yes. So that much long. data. Or with gaps also, I can do
Yeah,
that.
with gaps, there's no worry as long as you have information extending to that span.
That much span, yes. Okay, and here the bandwidths are like 8.25, meaning the
Plus or
per,
minus.
yeah,
So
plus minus. How is
16.5
this?
megahertz. Yeah.
How is this chosen? Meaning, is there some calculation? Because
No, this is
8.25
chosen for
means 16.
convenience. This was ideally chosen because the fastest rate at which one could record the data
Hmm.
dictated the maximum bandwidth we could use.
But meaning generally for convenience, we take whole numbers. And then when we are down converting it, we are doing it at double the range.
Yeah,
Okay.
so the whole number here is the 30 number to remember is 33 megahertz is the sampling clock,
Okay.
which
So half is
is
16.5
able to
into
sample half of that number as a bandwidth without aliasing.
so plus minus is 16.5. Okay.
No, it's
Half
0 to
of 33.
16.5
Half of 33.
sampled due to Nyquist criteria
Okay.
at 33 megahertz.
ठीक है. हाँ, that will give me this number. Okay, sir. Done. Thank you, sir.
Sir, I had like a doubt here. Like, how will we measure 3 sigma value of OT? And also, like, whenever we receive, like, analyze the data, how can we verify whether it is over 3 sigma value or not? Because unless it's over 3 sigma value, we can't like directly comment over whether it's complete, like, whether it's signal, actual signal or a noise. So,
I mean,
how
you can
can we
check
work
this
on it?
yourself. It's way more than 3 sigma, but essentially you'll see some signal, the profile, let's say. Even without folding, you can try to ascertain what is the noise level away from the pulse and at the pulse, and you can calculate a SNR and you can report that, how high it is and whether you believe it or not.
You can estimate the noise level when the pulse is not there, okay? Or even for the entire data, and use that as a guideline to assess what is significant and what is not.
Okay.
So if you see excursions well above that threshold, okay, then you can treat them as not random fluctuation of the noise.
Okay. Sir.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. So you'll see that there's a lot of spurious signals too that will go way above 3 sigma, but that's not really any real source. It's probably RF, radio frequency interference.